The biggest mistake that we make when it comes to giving 1-minute speeches is that whether it's an impromptu speech, whether it's a self-introduction or a toast at a wedding, we tend to focus on too many messages. For short speeches, we need to stop trying to condense a lot of information in as less time as possible and start shifting our focus to condensing our ideas into just one message. That's what will make our short 1-minute speeches all the more effective. And that's what we're going to discuss here today. What are the guidelines that we need to keep in mind to deliver an effective 1-minute speech, whether we have time to prepare for it or whether it's an impromptu speech? Towards the latter section of this video, we're also going to discuss 3 different frameworks that we can keep in mind to deliver a 1-minute speech, or in fact, any speech which is of a short duration in almost any setting. Hey, my name is Rudeep and I'm the founder of Frantically Speaking, and I love learning about effective communications and sharing those learnings with you so that you can level up your communications game as well. So the very first thing to keep in mind as we discuss is to focus on one message because we have such a short amount of time to speak in the first place. The next important thing we need to keep in mind, especially when we have less time to communicate our message, is to truly understand who our audience is. Because 1-minute speeches can take place almost anywhere and anytime, there's a good chance that we might start adapting one particular speech or framework in many different scenarios. Take an interview as an example. If an interviewer asks us to introduce ourselves and we have about a minute or so to do so, we should really not have one standard answer for different interviews, because it really depends who the interviewer is. If you're giving an interview in a place that is a young startup with a very open culture vibe, then we know that this introduction can be a lot less formal. We can use a lot more pop culture references, we can try and be funny, we can try and have a little wit, and overall focus on making our message creative. But on the other hand, if we are giving an interview with somebody who's from a strict corporate background in a very formal setting, our answer to the question, tell me about yourself or introduce yourself in an interview, needs to reflect that particular environment and that particular interviewer. So before you even start delivering the speech, whether it's an impromptu speech, take a few seconds to really understand who it is you're delivering your speech to. It doesn't have to be in front of an audience. It can be even in a one-to-one setting, and only then start actually speaking. When it comes to the delivery aspect of a 1-minute speech, it mainly comes down to the starting, the middle, and the end, as with almost any other speech. So let's try and break this down. When we talk about the beginning, now it's very common that in a speech we want to try and make our beginning and our introduction very gripping, but in a 1-minute speech we don't really need to do that. A simple introduction like, I'm going to keep this short, and continuing, or just simply starting with what your name is if you're asked to introduce yourself or why you're here in the first place, is good enough to begin a short speech. But the same thing might not necessarily apply to the ending. We want to try and make our ending a little more engaging than what our introduction is. Because it's a short speech, people will mainly only remember what we say towards the end of the speech. But of course, if this is an impromptu scenario, you might not have time to really come up with a gripping ending or conclusion. In that case, it's very easy to end with what our main message is. Whatever our one message is, if we can simply reveal or repeat that at the end of our 1-minute speech, that's good enough as well, because that's what the audience will tend to remember the most. And when it comes to the body, of course, there are a lot of different variations. Very hard to just bucket it down to any one particular technique over here, but simple direction that we can kind of take is to speak in the format of a story. So to give a personal anecdote or a personal experience is usually a good enough, like it's a safe bet when we're trying to give a short speech. I'm going to go over some examples in the frameworks that we discussed, which will break down the beginning, the body, and the conclusion. I'm also linking an article in the description below, which is on our website, franticallyspeaking.com. The article is on the same topic of how to deliver a 1-minute speech, but there are a few examples of other speeches that were done, which are within that short span of time. Check them out. It'll give you a good understanding of how you start and conclude and what you say in the middle of a short 1-minute speech. One thing that I do want to note is that if these aren't impromptu speeches and if you do have time to prepare for them, please utilize that time. It doesn't matter if it's a short speech or a long speech, putting in some time to prepare will just help make it that much more impactful. And 1-minute speeches can be really impactful if the right people are listening to you. So try to make some time to research for this particular speech. Even if you can come up with a few facts to back your argument, it'll really help in making your speech all the more persuasive. And even practicing it 3 or 4 times will help make it that much more impactful as opposed to just winging it. A simple rule of thumb is that approximately 150 words is good enough for a 1-minute speech. If you're trying to exceed that, we'll either talk too fast or we will stop too short. Okay, so those are some guidelines that we can keep in mind when we're delivering short speeches. Now let's move on to 3 different frameworks that we can keep in our mind at all times, which will help us deliver these short speeches in almost any situation. Okay, the first method is pretty common. It's called PREP, P-R-E-P, which is point, reason, example, point. Now this very simply means that you start with what your main point is, you give a reason for it, follow it up with an example, and then restate your point towards the end again. An example of demonstrating this is that if somebody asked me for my own introduction, I would say this. Hey, my name is Rudeep and I'm the founder of Frantically Speaking. We exist to help students, entrepreneurs, working professionals, and everyone in between become stronger communicators. I got into this field because I realized how speaking and being on stage can really help change a person's life and personality for the better, as it did with me. And that is why I founded this company, Frantically Speaking. Now that's a pretty straightforward way of doing it, and of course you can add your own spunk to it, and this is not even close to what I just said, is not even close to 1 minute long, but I hope you get the idea of where I'm going with this particular framework. The next framework is WWW, which is who you are, what do you do, and where are you going from here. Again, to give the example for self-introduction, this would kind of flow like this. Hey, my name is Rudeep and I'm the founder of Frantically Speaking. I came into this industry because I was a very nervous speaker all my life, and I had so many embarrassing moments and made so many mistakes while doing public speaking and while communicating that I wish I had a resource, or I knew of a resource that could help me actually avoid all those mistakes. So I wanted to make sure that I document all my learnings, whatever I've read in books, whatever my personal experiences have been, whatever courses I've taken in this space, and share them with people to help them reach their goals of becoming an effective communicator faster. And the next framework is an abbreviation called STEEP UP, which stands for Social, Technological, Economical, Environmental, Political, Universal, and Personal. Now, I'm not going to go an example over here, but this framework essentially helps us to give a really comprehensive view of any one particular topic. And it really helps when we need to give technical short speeches or presentations. And that's about it. Some guidelines to help you give a 1 minute speech and some frameworks to keep in mind, which can help us in almost any setting, whether it's impromptu or whether we have time to prepare for it. If you have any more questions when it comes to things like public speaking, communications, or anything in that space, we have an entire website with in-depth articles and resources dedicated just for that. So go check out franticallyspeaking.com.